We could hear you, Della.
And we're live.
Just on our end, it hasn't gone live on YouTube.
Yeah, we're live.
On YouTube?
Yep, we're live.
All right, welcome everyone who has joined. We're going to get started in just a few minutes here, so thank you for joining. And as we get settled in, if you wouldn't mind just changing your participant name to let us know who you are, we'd appreciate that. If you just hover over your screen, you'll see a participants icon at the bottom. And if you click on that, it'll open up the participant list and you can just let us know your name, your affiliation, pronouns, however you like to identify yourself. Welcome everyone. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes here as folks are joining. We would love to know who's in the room. So if you don't mind just kind of opening up your participant list, if you hover over your screen, you'll see a participant icon at the bottom. If you find your name, you can click the blue rename button to let us know your name, your affiliation, pronouns, or however you like to identify yourself. Okay, welcome everyone. I think we're going to go ahead and get started now. It's a couple of minutes after 3 o'clock, so we'll just dive in so that we can leave time for the workshop content. So thanks for joining. This is the second Getting Us Out of a Jam workshop. We had a great first workshop yesterday, and we're excited to offer it again to you all this afternoon. And this workshop is part of the Oregon Department of Transportation's effort to bring congestion pricing to I-5 and I-205 in the Portland metro area. And my name is Sylvia Chiborowski, and I'll be helping to facilitate today's workshop. And in a little bit, I'm going to hand it over to Lucinda Broussard, the ODOT Oregon Toll Program Director. But first, I just want to walk through some of our participation tips and tools and go through a few ways to get to know each other here. So we're going to be using Zoom today. And the first half of the workshop is going to be primarily some panel discussions and some information out and interactive activities. And we'll ask you to stay on mute for those pieces, but use video so that we can kind of feel like we're in the same room together. I will say that we got a note that ODOT is having some slow connection issues this afternoon, and we hope that that will not cause too much interruption to today's workshop, but we just ask for some grace if we do have any slowness in today's meeting. And if we need to, we'll turn off some of the video. But in the meantime, please feel free to keep your video on so that we can get to know each other a little bit here. If you're familiar with the Zoom platform, if you hover over your screen, the mute button's kind of in the left-hand corner and the video is right there too. You can change your participant name by clicking on that participant icon and find your name. Click on the blue button to just let us know your name, affiliation, pronouns. If you are needing closed captioning today, there's also a closed captioning button at the bottom, and just select live transcript there and then show subtitle. Today, we're just asking that you use chat for troubleshooting only. If you have any issues, just send a chat message to the host, Madeline, or you can call or email her at the numbers that are up on the screen right there. So next slide. I wanted to say, members of the public, thank you for joining the live stream if you are joining us today. And we encourage you to go to the project website to get materials for today's meeting. That's probably where you went to get the live stream link for today. So just go to oregontolling.org and click on Regional Mobility Pricing Project to get all the materials and information. They're just kind of at the first entry of the website for today's workshop. You can also use your smartphone to scan the QR code that's on the screen right now. If you just pop up your camera app and take a photo of the QR code, you'll be linked to the project website to get information for today's workshop. And as you know, the workshop today is really limited to invited elected officials and stakeholders so that we can have a focused conversation with people who have been deeply engaged and have a direct link to the project. And we do plan for broader public engagement in 2022 and look forward to more participation then. And also throughout today's meeting, you'll be able to provide your input, members of the public, through an online survey, and we'll talk about that in just a second. If we go to the next slide. Before I hand it over to Lucinda Broussard for some welcoming notes, I want to know kind of who's in the room today, and we want to hear from you. And at this point, we want to introduce you to some of our interactive input tools. So workshop participants, if you are in the Zoom room right now, we invite you to pull out your smartphones, just pull it out right now and open up a browser, Safari, Chrome, whatever you use, and type in menti.com to go to that website. And you're going to get a code in the chat. And we invite you to put that code into the screen that pops up there to be directed to our sort of introduction questions. And members of the public, you are invited to go to a SurveyMonkey to follow along and answer the same questions that we'll be asking in our workshop today. So you can just go to surveymonkey.com/r/FB2N7PK and answers questions number 1 through 6, or you can also just snap the QR code that's on the screen right here. And this link is also on the website where we directed you just a few minutes ago. We'll give you a second to access those tools. All right, so maybe let's go to the Menti screen now for workshop participants. So hopefully you got a question that's asking you, what part of the Portland metro region do you most connect with? So where do you live, play, or work? And we invite you to put in your response And it may be more than one place if you live or work in different counties. You just kind of want to get a sense of who's here in the room. All right, and it's looking like we got a number of folks from Multnomah County and a smaller group from Clackamas and Clark counties. Someone from Washington County as well. So thanks for joining. Give you a few seconds there. Perfect. Okay, well, maybe let's go to the next question now. We have two more kind of intro questions here. So next we want to know, what do you most want to get out of today's workshop? Are you wanting to learn more about the congestion pricing efforts? Are you wanting to really provide your input and let ODOT know what you think? Or are you here to hear from others? And you can select more than one. And if it's something else, if there's something else you're hoping to get out of today's workshop, please put that in the chat so that our project team can know, because we're curious to hear, what brought you here today? What are you hoping to get out of today? It's looking pretty even, like you're wanting to learn more, provide input, and hear from others, and we'll have opportunities to do all of that today. Okay, and last question. We want to get a sense of how much do you feel like you already know about this congestion pricing effort and the Oregon toll program? So are you feeling like you're coming in with a lot of knowledge, very knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable, or maybe you're like, I don't know that much about this. I'm pretty unfamiliar or very unfamiliar. Let us know where you're feeling. All right, it's feeling like people are pretty knowledgeable. Maybe by the end of today, you'll be feeling very knowledgeable. That's our hope, that we can provide you with the information you need to know that you have all the latest information on the congestion pricing effort. Okay, well, thank you for participating in that. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Lucinda Broussard to give us a little bit of a welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Am I good on my video?
Yes, we hear and see you.
Great. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Lucinda Broussard, the Toll Program Director for ODOT in the Urban Mobility Office. I've been doing tolling for over 20 years, or transportation-like projects. And I think that this one that we're going to talk about today is exciting. It's challenging for sure, but definitely exciting. I want to thank you for joining us. I know it's going to be it's 3 hours, but we did it yesterday. I thought it went really fast. It's very interactive. We're looking for your perspectives. So we're asking that, give space for others who might be quiet in your groups when we do our our breakout rooms. There might be some people who are quiet, but I think quiet voices, when we allow them to speak up, we all learn something. So just looking forward to what happens later. Today's workshop, we're going to introduce the Regional Mobility Pricing Project. And I think that it's interesting, complex project, but it's not. I think we're going to break it down into some smaller pieces. You'll get to hear the history, how we got here, and then where we're planning on going from here. It's a discussion. It's not a lot of slides. We're not trying to, just provide you some information. We want to hear back from you too. So we're going to be just talking about what's going on. We've been out there for about the last 6 months. Some people have, as I've seen in the Minty, a lot of people know something about what we're doing. So this is a little bit more about what we're doing. I would say this is the why. Why are we doing this? And that's what we're going to try to answer today. I think that we all know there are problems in the region. We talk about congestion. Everybody talks about congestion. That's just one of the problems. We also are talking about inequities. There's a climate crisis. There's stagnating quality of life. These challenges are happening now, and we're here now. So we are it's our time to do something. I would say congestion pricing is coming to Portland, or it's coming to Oregon. It's already here. I mean, we talk about this is new, this is different, first in the nation. The application that we're doing is first in the nation, but not the tolls. Tolls are all over the country. They're in Washington, they're in California. So our sister states actually have tolls. And pretty much all the major cities have tolls. So it's not new. Internationally, there's tolls, but the application that we're doing is new. I would say that you're gonna hear us talk about, why is it important to do this? So we got the why, we're gonna get the how, and then we're gonna all talk about the what in our breakout rooms. So I just wanna say thank you. It doesn't work without you. We want this to be a successful project. We can't do that without you. So we're asking that we all roll up our sleeves and then join us in making this work. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Lucinda, for that. Okay, I'll just spend a couple of minutes going over our agenda and then we will dive in. So today we're going to get a little bit of history and context on congestion pricing in the region from ODOT Director Chris Strickler. And then after that, a little bit of, how does congestion pricing fit in our region and how will it work? What is this going to look like on the ground? After that, we're going to have a mini panel of members from the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee talking about how this project is seeking to center equity and some of the challenges and opportunities related to equity and congestion pricing. And we'll also hear a little bit about community engagement to date, what we've been hearing from the community and the public through outreach efforts over the summer and really over the past couple of years. And we'll also have a panel discussion on stories from across the nation, people that have experienced congestion pricing in other parts of the country. What did they learn? What was it like? What was it like bringing it to their communities? And then we will also have an overview of the purpose and need, which is really the first major decision for this congestion pricing effort. And throughout all these pieces, we're also going to have some more interactive activities through the Menti exercise so that we can continue to get your input. And the last part of today, like the last half of today's workshop, is really going to be small group discussion focused on a few topics so that we can understand how can congestion pricing really meet the region's needs. So we look forward to breaking you out into small groups there. And then we'll, of course, report back. And then a few discussion guidelines. We hope that you all can stay engaged throughout today's workshop. We know it's 3 hours, it's the end of the day, but please stay engaged if you can. We hope that you're here to listen, to understand, stay curious, keep an open mind, let yourself be surprised to new information, new perspectives, but of course, be authentic in your perspective too. When we get into our discussions, we will be seeking that balance with speaking time, making sure that you're speaking up to bring your voice to the table, but also allowing others to speak. And of course, take care of yourself. We're going to have a couple of breaks, but if you need to get up, move around, do whatever you need to take care of yourself here. All right, so with that, I am going to hand it over to ODOT Director Chris Strickler for some history and context.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, Lucinda. I'm going to guess that somebody will let me know if you can't hear me. I'll also acknowledge that we're having some network connectivity issues throughout the day, or at least I am within my system. So if I bounce in and out, or if I have to shut off my camera, I'm still here with you for at least a little while. For history and context, and I wonder if we can go to the next slide, or maybe you have already and it's just not catching up on my screen. I wanted to start with a thank you. So as Sylvia mentioned, my name is Chris Strickler. I have the privilege of serving as ODOT Director, and I've been in this role for a couple of years, and really we've got a significant amount of work that we've been taking on, and we have more work into the future. And I think I heard Lucinda mention it, we can't do it without you, and the you is a broad you. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation today. In looking forward to it, I do have to say, it's an amazing dedication of time. So the interest that the public and that stakeholders all carry and bring to transportation, and specifically this issue around transportation, is fantastic. I look forward to hearing some of that. And it's not lost on me, just the dedication that comes with putting yourself in, not just in the discussion, but putting yourself out there and bringing your ideas and thoughts to the table. I can't thank you enough for your participation. It really does make us better, and it helps us make better decisions as we move forward. So a little bit about the system. ODOT is a very diverse system, and let me just start by stating the obvious, or the thing that everybody sees. Clearly, we construct and manage roadway systems, and for a long time, we've been thought of as the highway department or the roadway department. I can assure you that our name is Department of Transportation, not Department of Highways. We do much, much more than that. So we manage a diverse system of interstates, urban arterials, rural roads, et cetera. But we also manage a significant bike lane network. We also are one of the first adopters and implementers of the West Coast Electric Highway. We are also one of the largest contributors in some peer states across the country for investments in pedestrian mobility and bicyclists. So we have a significant system, and they all have to complement each other. And when I say they all, it's all of the modes have to complement each other in order to really accomplish what we really hope for the system within Oregon. Oregon's a great exporter of many things, so I have to tell you, we serve an economic need as well. We export computer chips, trucks, forest products, ag products, and we also come to the table with what I'm really proud of, especially as it relates to our ODOT staff, but the peers that I know within the industry. We bring a human capital or an intellectual capacity that contributes to our overall economy in the state of Oregon, and that's an exciting thing to be part of as well. Of course, in addition to the traditional economic benefits supported by the system, we also have a great place to live. Oregon is fantastic. The beauty, the people, the things that we're able to rely upon within our natural wonder of this state, many of those things are only accessible through that transportation system. And in fact, we all use the transportation system to get to a point to where we step away from the system for a little bit and get a little R&R, whether that's on a hike or something else. And so as we think about just our overall impact, we know that this is a diverse system and it's an ecosystem that all ties back to each other. But I do want to close, at least on this slide, and not close my opening remarks, but for this slide here and say simply, congestion is impacting us. It's impacting Oregonians. It's impacting Oregon businesses. It's not serving our state well. And as our region continues to grow and our highway systems kind of help to support that economy, we have a choice to make. Can we help our system support or hold it back? In addition to that, we also have this moment before us where we know that transportation contributes to over 40% of GHG or greenhouse gases within our state. That's a significant number, and we have an obligation to work with peer partners, whether that's other agencies or partners in the private sector, to really come up with solutions and advance conversations that help to reduce that. As we think about how we got here, I want to start with something as far back as a visioning process over 5 years in the making. So back in 2015, the governor convened a transportation vision panel that was comprised of legislators, business owners, civic leaders, and many more, and held 11 regional forums across the state to hear from community members about the transportation priorities within our state. It's no secret to many, and for any of you that are hearing this for the first time, you're going to hear this a lot more, both today and into the future as we talk about this program. That visioning panel found that congestion on Portland highways impacts our competitiveness across the entire state. So those that are living in the Medford-Roseburg area, those that are living in Baker City, those that are living in Bend, rely on the transportation network that passes through the Portland region. And the economic impact of the congestion that's felt there is real, and it goes beyond just people's commute from in the morning and evening commute times. The panel recommended a few things. They recommended removing bottlenecks that address the congestion in Portland, really focusing on priority corridors of I-5 and I-205. Recommended investments in the freight network and alternatives to improve capacity and efficiency. And it also recommended, and this is really important because this gets back to who we are as an agency, it also recommended additional transportation options, demand management strategies, providing more investment in transit, rideshare, biking, and walking, as well as private employer and public employer incentives that really help to manage that congestion. So you can think of it as we're really looking at, and this visioning panel started us down the path of, we have a bunch of tools at our disposal, and we're at a point where we need to start using all of them. The work of that visioning panel led to the passage of House Bill 2017, and here we are in 2021 having this conversation now. In 2017, significant investments in public transportation, increased funding for bike and ped infrastructure, and improvements to our rail and port infrastructure, as well as key bottleneck fixes and congestion pricing to reduce traffic jams in the Portland area, all began to kind of invest and move us forward. A couple of things that we began moving forward immediately in 2017 The State Transportation Improvement Fund, it was initiated by the legislature and is now the largest funding mechanism for expanding and enhancing public transportation across the state. We saw significant increases in funding for safe routes to school, bicycle and pedestrian projects. We saw dedicated funds to off-system improvements in the form of Connect Oregon projects and a stable commitment to ongoing Connect Oregon contributions. Many, many projects began and have already been completed and more underway across the state to help benefit our freight movement, removing bottlenecks, et cetera. And here we are today in 2021, most recently with the passage of House Bill 3055, and really following up on that other element that was in House Bill 2017 of moving forward with a congestion price approach in the Portland region. Next slide.
And if you're not
All
seeing
right.
it, Chris, the next slide is
talking.
up there. We're seeing last week on congestion.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Perfect. Okay. In late 2017, the value pricing feasibility analysis began. This was a 25-member policy advisory committee really framed around this question. Could congestion pricing help to address the problems that were identified by the governor's panel in 2016? After a year-long technical analysis, significant public engagement, clearly we're in this position now because that panel concluded that congestion pricing can play a significant role, not just in managing congestion, but also to raise revenue to fund some of the other transportation investments that are necessary. And then next slide. As we think about what it takes to move something like this forward, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge or recognize that we're in the midst of a challenging time. The importance of developing an equitable program is absolutely central to the mission of our Oregon Toll Program. We recognize that transportation has not always, and still doesn't in many areas, serve all of the populations in the state of Oregon. We also recognize that we've historically made some less than desirable decisions and really detrimental decisions for those that we provided access to across the state. We have members of our communities that have been underserved for quite some time, and we know that we have to make decisions differently going forward. So our entire toll program that Lucinda is leading up is really designed to bring some of these elements and the congestion pricing element into the fold and really have an intentional conversation around equity. You're going to hear more about that today. There's a clear recognition, like I said before, that transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. So this speaks to the climate crisis and the need to do something. This is one of the tools in the toolbox that allows us to do that. The consequences of inaction on climate change have been painfully clear. You see in the photo that is a portion of that beauty that I mentioned before, that, you know, certainly the reason why I live here, or one of the reasons I should say. But the wildfire and the impact and the high temperatures in Portland that we experienced in 2021, all of these things really contributing and demonstrating to us the consequences of inaction around climate change. In addition to those things, we are experiencing significant impacts right now in job loss, a widening wealth gap within our society and within our communities. And a lot of that is a direct result of the pandemic, but not all of it. We're all experiencing loss and impact and fatigue associated with the pandemic. I only bring all of that up to acknowledge and recognize that every one of these things is real. And every one of these things could at least give you an understanding, or at least tell each of us, geez, maybe this is a reason for us to do something later, or for us to get through this moment before we get on to the next. And I'm here to tell you that I believe these are all reasons to increase our urgency. We have direction, and we feel a sense of urgency to move forward with the program. And we feel so because there's such significant need, and these things are not going away without us throwing all of these tools that we have in order to manage the system and bring better outcomes for our BIPOC communities, bring better outcomes for Oregonians across the entire state of Oregon, bring better outcomes for our relationships and our partners to both the north and the south. As we think about the transportation network and the system operating as one instead of these disparate singular projects that are one-offs. In a little bit, I believe you're going to hear from Ms. Mosier, who was kind of carrying a portion of this presentation. She's going to talk a little bit more about that approach, that comprehensive approach of, instead of one project at a time in that finish-start relationship, but really recognizing that we have all kinds of tools that we can employ, and we should be thinking about all of them. That's what we are here for. And I think she's going to give a little more detail to what I'm describing now. But as with anything, I do want to say thank you again. I find myself in these settings frequently where I have the opportunity to not just open up, but extend my appreciation, because it is that interaction with the public, it is that interaction with our stakeholders that really helps us to make better decisions and really helps us in this time for all of these challenges that you see on the screen, or at least I think you see on the screen since I'm not seeing it online. And it really helps to frame how we make those decisions going into the future. So before we hear from Ms. Mosier, I will first turn it back to Sylvia to lead us through a transition. I want to thank you, appreciate all that you bring to this conversation, and look forward to the outcomes.
Thank you so much, Director. Really appreciate that history and context. And it really is, there are a lot of challenges, and we know that you all probably have many questions and concerns when it comes to the congestion pricing project. And so we want to hear what are your top questions and concerns. So we invite you to go back to the browser that you had open on your phones with the Menti app, or just go again to menti.com and put the code in that you'll find in the chat. If you're not able to access it from your phone, you can also open a browser on your computer and go to menti.com and put in that code. And live stream viewers, of course, go to the Survey Monkey here and answer question number 7, which will follow along with what we're doing here. So let's go over to the Menti question. And we want to hear from you, what is your biggest concern or question about congestion pricing? This is an open-ended question here, so just put in what comes to mind for you, and you can submit more than one response if you have multiple concerns or multiple questions, and we just want to hear the main ones here. So we'll let these populate for a little bit, and this question will be open throughout the next presentation, so you can continue to populate with whatever your questions and concerns are. Okay, so I'm seeing there's questions about the coordination with various projects that are going on in the region that have tolling as a part of them. A question about wasting resources, if congestion pricing is effective, or is this inducing demand by expanding freeway capacity? Concern about the conflict between congestion management and revenue generation, which, those are kind of the two goals of the project, is congestion management and revenue generation. So that's a concern here. Concern about maybe we're not incentivizing reduction of VMT, or vehicle miles traveled, and switching to low and zero emissions. Concern that revenue might be used to pay for more than just highway widening projects, and about whether this would induce more congestion, more demand. Concern about ensuring that BIPOC communities have been displaced due to gentrification and high housing costs, impacts of diversion. Now, these are some big concerns, big questions, and we do hope to address some of these today, and we'll have time to talk about a lot of these in our breakout rooms. And I invite you to keep it going with your questions and concerns. I think we can take down the slide, though, and move into the next part of our presentation. And I'm going to hand it over to Della Mosier, ODOT's Urban Mobility Office Deputy Director, to provide a little bit of information on, why is congestion pricing needed in the region and how could it work? So Della, over to you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good deal. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Sylvia said, my name is Della Mosier, and it's my sincere pleasure to be here with you all today, our partners and our community, to continue the conversation around congestion pricing in the Portland region. Next slide. Looking at the Menti poll that just was surveyed, there's a lot of concerns and questions from that poll. Questions around the conflicts between congestion management and revenue generation, how we're strategically making investments for bottlenecks so that we aren't just blindly widening freeways. Concerns about diversion, as well as the undue burden that can be placed on BIPOC communities, certainly from projects that have been done in the past, and how do we avoid repeating those historic harms as we start to implement the transportation of the future. ODOT recognizes that our world has changed and that we have pressing problems much like these that really can't be addressed with just concrete and asphalt. To that end, ODOT launched the Urban Mobility Office with the charge to intentionally address the biggest challenges of our day. Challenges like inequity caused by historic and current systemic racism. Challenges like the climate crisis and global greenhouse gas emissions that are still rising. Challenges like congestion and the hours we all spend in stop and go traffic every week, whether we're in a car or whether we're on transit. Challenges like rising crash fatalities, especially among pedestrians. And challenges funding a system that no longer pays for the improvements that we all need to be able to continue to grow as a community. Next slide. We know that we cannot do this alone. And so as Director Strickler and Toll Program Director Broussard mentioned, we are asking you, our partners, to bring your expertise, your knowledge, and your lived experience to join us in this once in a generation opportunity. We need your help to implement a comprehensive approach to managing congestion in the Portland region. And we know that we can't do this without you, and we need your help to get this right. Next slide. ODOT is changing the way we do business by delivering major projects in the Portland region with a strategic and comprehensive approach. Here's a look at the investments to the ODOT system that the Urban Mobility Office is coordinating. And as you can see from the icons, they all include a lot more than just concrete and asphalt. We want the next 40 years to include a transportation system that's beneficial for everyone, especially people that have been historically marginalized or excluded. Next slide. So what happens if we do not act? Well, congestion gets worse, and that results in increased delays to our deliveries. It means we spend more hours stuck in stop and go traffic, and we adversely impact our local communities by diverting traffic off the interstates and expanding gridlock on the local street system. We will also continue to increase greenhouse gas emissions. And we end up with reduced safety for investments for all modes of transportation. Next slide. Before we get into more detail, let's take a moment to clarify what we mean by tolls and congestion pricing. All of you likely have experience paying tolls. There's toll roads, bridges, and tunnels. There's a couple bridges east of Portland over the Columbia River, the Hood River Bridge, and the Bridge of the Gods that are already tolled. A toll is simply a fee to use a facility. Congestion pricing is just the type of tolling where we charge higher fees during different times of the day, like rush hour, to encourage a small number of drivers to change their travel options. Next slide. Most of us pay for what we value. We pay for it directly, like when we buy food at a grocery store, or sometimes indirectly, like how we spend our limited 24-hour allotment of time each day. Again, you'll notice a common theme here. ODOT is truly inviting our partners and our community to help us shape a plan that will strike the correct balance between managing congestion and raising revenue. Congestion pricing, again, is really just about encouraging a small number of vehicles to choose different options. And that balance will improve our climate stewardship, safety on our highways, and will give you a reliable commute home, giving you back valuable time with your loved ones. Next slide. This slide shows the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, which is a project to apply congestion pricing to the areas shown here on blue on the map. The areas include I-5 from just north of the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project at the North Columbia Interchange, south to the Boone Bridge in Wilsonville, and I-205 from the Glenn Jackson Bridge to where it connects with I-5 in Tualatin. The toll rate is the tool we have to both manage congestion and raise the revenue. Next slide, please. So how does modern tolling and congestion pricing work? I enjoyed a question about this from my mom about a year ago, asking me if she would have to pull up to a toll plaza if we were to install tolling here in Oregon. Here you can see that's not the case. The system is all electronic. There are no toll booths, no stopping, and no slowing down. Instead, there would be a transponder in your car, and a picture of one is shown here on the slide. That transponder would be connected to your online account. And if you didn't have a transponder or an account, cameras would capture your license plate number and send you a bill, which you would then be able to pay by mail or online. Next slide. So how much will the tolls actually cost? Great question. And at this time, we don't know the toll rates. The Regional Mobility Pricing Project is in the preliminary environmental phase of the work. And so we are a couple of years out from completing that work and being ready to propose toll rates. The rates are how we adjust the dials of congestion pricing. We will need to decide where are the tolls, what time of the day do we toll, and which vehicles will be tolled. We will need to adjust the tolls to create an equitable access to the system, like using an income-based toll rate. And in the end, a robust public process will inform the recommendation to the Oregon Transportation Commission, which will set the rates. You all will have an opportunity to provide input on the rates months before the commission sets those rates. Another fundamental tenet of this project is that you only pay for what you use on parts of I-5 and I-205. So for example, if you were to take a trip from Wilsonville to Lake Oswego, you might start on I-5 North, exit on I-205 North, and then exit on Stafford Road and head on to Lake Oswego. You would have taken about a 12-mile trip. 7 of those miles would have been on I-5 and I-205, and that's the portion of your travel that you would pay the tolls for. You would not pay tolls for I-5 up at Rose Quarter or I-205 over in Oregon City. If the trip is at rush hour, it could cost more, or if you're driving a delivery truck, it could cost more. The tolls won't be a surprise. You'll be able to look them up online or in an a phone app, before you make your trip so that you can plan ahead. Next slide. As many of you know, our partners at Metro and PBOT have also been studying congestion pricing. In these recent years, they've accomplished some really excellent work. In many ways, their findings align with ours, that congestion pricing can help our region as long as it's done right. In their work, they've also highlighted some of the same primary concerns. Concerns about the potential for diversion from highways onto local streets. Concerns about how to provide transit and non-automobile transportation options and how to find reliable funding sources for them. And we are all concerned about how congestion pricing would affect the least fortunate in our region. So I'll end with this call to action. Congestion pricing is coming to our region, and it will take all of us to make sure we get it right. And getting it right is really about doing this equitably. I'm going to now turn it over to Chris Lopez to talk about the work of our Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee and our equity framework for the toll projects. Chris?
Thank you, Della. So it's a real pleasure to be with you all today as one representative of a team of people working to advance equity as part of this process with ODOT. For those of you that haven't met me before, I began working with ODOT about 2 years ago to help apply Transform's Pricing Roads Advancing Equity Report and Toolkit to the I-5 and I-205 toll projects. Transform, if you haven't heard of the organization before, is a nonprofit that's focused on advancing climate and equity and transportation and land use planning and policy. And a little over a year ago, I moved on from Transform over to Mariposa Planning Solutions, a firm I recently started. And I must say that, shifting from working externally in sort of nonprofit advocacy and now internally within agencies, I continue to believe that equity advancement is really essential in congestion pricing plans, not just to ensure optimal outcomes for society as a whole, but also an essential ingredient to gaining public support. Today, I'll be sharing some context on the program's equity framework and the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, EMAC, and I'll then hand it off to 2 members of the EMAC to share their perspectives and experience. So if we can go to the next slide. The toll program developed the equity framework, the toll projects equity framework, to provide a roadmap to help ensure equitable outcomes and an intentional and equitable engagement process for the I-5 and I-205 toll projects. The program worked with a team of equity specialists to create the framework with input and ultimately approval from the EMAC. A few key highlights from the framework include a commitment to minimizing burdens and maximizing benefits to communities that transportation projects have historically underserved or excluded. There are 4 dimensions of equity, which include full participation, access to opportunity, community health, and affordability, and 7 organizing principles, which include incorporating a trauma-informed perspective, beginning with a racial analysis, and prioritizing input from historically excluded and underserved communities. It also includes a 5-step iterative process that you can see here, which includes identifying who, what, and where, identifying equity outcomes and performance measures, determining benefits and burdens, choosing options that advance equity, and providing accountable feedback and evaluation. So on to the next slide. Since the framework was adopted over a year ago, EMAC, along with project staff, program staff, have been at work translating the intent of the framework into action. One of the ways in which the program is unique is that EMAC reports and provides recommendations directly to the Oregon Transportation Commission, the OTC, which is a toll setting authority. ODOT's role in assisting and supporting EMAC is ODOT's role is assisting and supporting EMAC in identifying the actions and commitments needed to advance equity. In other words, ODOT is there in a supportive role to EMAC. On to the next slide. EMAC utilizes a consensus-based approach to making recommendations, and it's been really great to see and observe this commitment play out at the EMAC meetings. In May, EMAC came up with a draft set of preferred options, which includes a specific dollars or percentage set aside for transit and multimodal investments from toll revenue. On to the next slide. In October, EMAC agreed upon a set of foundational principles that underpin an extensive set of draft policy and strategy recommendations. These principles will be presented to the OTC later this month with the intent to gain alignment with OTC before the toll program moves forward with important steps in the months to come. And if we go to the next slide here, we're gonna have a little bit of conversation here with the members, 2 members of the EMAC. So I'd like to introduce you now to Bill Bauman and James Paulson. These are volunteers that share their time and their talent with us, not just during the EMAC meetings, but in many cases in subcommittee meetings and even one-on-ones with program staff. So they've been a really essential ingredient of this effort, and we're very fortunate to have the 2 of them here with us today to share their experience and perspective. So a quick introduction, Bill Bauman is Mobility Coordinator with Community in Motion, and James Paulson is Board Chair at Work Systems, Inc., a small business owner. He is a Portland native and graduate of Portland Public Schools. So we got a couple questions that Bill and James are gonna dive into. The first is, can you speak to the EMAC's foundational statements, which we shared briefly there on the screen for everybody? And the second is, what are your aspirations when it comes to implementing congestion pricing equitably, and what are the barriers? So we'll start with the first one, which is, can you speak to the EMAC's foundational statements? Bill or James, either you want to jump in first?
James, you can take it.
Okay, thanks. Well, let me start by saying, at the beginning, when you have, ODOT leadership kind of coming out and recognizing challenges that have been the result of past projects, displacement and so forth, change starts at the top. And so it's refreshing that ODOT leadership is actually following through on it. And I really look at what EMAC is doing is kind of an extension of that. Instead of just kind of giving it lip service, it's kind of putting it into action. And that's where, where we're grounded in the fact that ODOT has been a challenging organization for low income communities and Black and Hispanic communities, especially in Northeast Portland. And so with the work that we're doing at EMAC, it's given an opportunity for a deeper dive into the work that goes into pulling off congestion pricing. And instead of this work taking place, you know, in Salem with ODOT, now they're bringing in voices. And, you know, the meetings, I can't remember how many people are a part of the EMAC. I mean, it's north of 20 people, and everyone that's on it is well informed as far as their specific areas having to do with transportation. Like, my area of expertise in this region is around workforce and being a small business owner. And I bring that to the table, where there's a lot of people who have other expertises with other communities that have found some of the work that ODOT's done in the past very challenging. And so it's a deep knowledge base, but it really comes back to the support from the top. I'll kick it over to Bill from there.
Thank you, James. So to touch on the foundational statements, these foundational statements are the building blocks that we are using to develop and refine our recommendations to ODOT and the Oregon Transportation Commission. To give you a little background on the project, so over the past 2 years, the EMAC members have met and worked on this project, and we've come to the realization that this project is much bigger than what we are able to accomplish during that time period. So at this stage in the project, we simply do not have enough information to make truly equitable recommendations. So the foundational statements are sort of our way, or they allow us to share our work that we've accomplished over the past 2 years and what we think that needs to happen for the toll project to be equitable, recognizing that we have more work to do and we'll probably be here for another 2 years.
Yeah.
Excellent points. Is there anything else that you want to share out about the foundational statements? Anything in particular that you're really excited about, for example? Anything that's really important to you?
I think one of those is the second one, where we've identified that climate and equity needs are interconnected. And so if you're trying to meet one of those needs, you're most likely going to touch on other ones as well. And so just having that thought process or that awareness at this stage in the project, knowing that those two are interconnected, we can work to meet those needs as we go forward, instead of sort of doing 2 different projects and then trying to bring them together at the last minute.
Mm-hmm. And James, is there anything you wanted to add as well?
No, that's spot on for me.
That's great. So that actually is a good segue to our next set of questions. So what are your aspirations when it comes to implementing congestion pricing equitably? And also if you want to talk about the barriers, but let's talk about aspirations first.
So I can jump in on this one. So I'm one of the Washington members who sits on the EMAC committee, and my aspirations for this project are to make sure that the needs of Washingtonians are adequately represented during this process, making sure that the equitable measures implemented to reduce the negative effects and potential barriers imposed by tolling on our most vulnerable populations, think low-income, car-dependent, non-English speakers, people with disabilities, for example, making sure that all of those measures are extended to all residents of the Portland metro area, regardless of which side of the Columbia River they live on. Thank you.
And I would second that. And the other piece for me is kind of looking at workforce mobility and making sure that we don't set up a system that makes it even more challenging for people to get to and from work. Because as we know, most of the best paying jobs are in, you know, the city core. And so you have people who have to commute oftentimes from, say, East Multnomah County into the city core to find those types of jobs, or come up from the south or come down from Vancouver. And so it's like, I want to make sure that people who are in paycheck by paycheck type jobs aren't priced out. And with that, I also don't want to see the congestion on the streets adjacent to the tolling areas to become gridlocked to the point where small businesses are being impacted. People aren't able to access these areas. People avoid these areas. And, you know, we don't want to have it so that, if you have someone who has a disability or is a senior citizen or something like that who needs to get around to do their appointments and the streets are gridlocked, you're not able to get buses through, that's not the outcome. The outcome isn't to move the poor and disenfranchised off of the freeways and onto the side streets. The plan is to say, how can we put this together so that all people involved are finding benefit, and so that not one group is taking the burden? And that's what I aspire to.
Beautiful. One word on, sort of one final word, real concisely if you can, because we're limited on time. Any barrier that you want to call out? Any barriers to implementing congestion pricing equitably? Name one barrier.
The one barrier I would call out is where the collected funds are going to go and how those are going to be collected.
I would say making sure that all residents have equitable transportation options to get through tolling areas, regardless of where they live. So no matter what state, if they're in Oregon or if they're in Washington. And I understand that's a pretty big barrier that goes beyond the scope of this project, but I feel like this is a good place to bring that to light.
Excellent points. You guys never cease to impress me. Thank you so much to the both of you for spending your time with us today, and your insight is always great stuff. Sylvia, did you want to take it from here?
I will. Thank you. Thanks so much, Chris, James, and Bill, and really the whole EMAC for all of your great work. And thanks for sharing, kind of your aspirations and barriers that you see when it comes to implementing congestion pricing equitably. We want to turn it now to workshop participants and the public to kind of weigh in. We want to hear from you, now that you've heard kind of ODOT's vision and what they see, and from the EMAC, we want to hear, when you think of a transportation system, what's most important to you when you think about congestion pricing on I-5 and I-205. So we invite you to pull out your phones again and go to the Menti platform. And the code is in the chat again for workshop participants. If you're participating in the live stream or watching through the live stream, please go to the Survey Monkey and answer question number 8. And if we can pull up the Menti screen here, we have a question about what 3 words describe an ideal transportation system for you. Really thinking about the I-5 and I-205 corridors. What do you want to see? What 3 words describe it? And we'll just let the words pop up for a second here. Okay. So seeing that safety is coming up a lot, a safe transportation system. On transportation options, equitable. So making sure that all of this is implemented equitably is important. Okay, see a lot of other terms too: sustainable, affordable, multimodal. That's really going to those options. Accessible, fewer cars, transit, energy efficient. Okay, so thank you. We'll keep this question up in the Menti platform for a little while longer if you want to keep putting in your words if you haven't had a chance to yet. And I'm going to hand it over now to Anne Presentine to give an update on what we've been hearing from the public over the past few months through some community engagement efforts. Thanks.
Thank you, Sylvia. Looking for just confirmation that the sound is okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. To start, I want to give you a little flavor of what we've been hearing recently in the community. And next slide, we had a series of 6 discussion groups this summer, and we're going to hear from the organizers of those discussion groups now.
People in my community don't think that adding toll will help reduce traffic. And most people don't want to have this tolling So they don't like that idea that all lanes will be tolled. They would like to have options if it's possible.
The burdens that I heard from my community is if tolls is put in, what would be the effect of the tolls, such as, is someone going to get arrested if they don't pay the toll fee? Are we going to have toll police? Like, am I going to get my car ticket? If I don't pay these tolls fine, or I can't afford the tolls fine, what's going to happen? Where's the money going to go? Because there's going to be a lot of money that's going to be made off of these tolls. How is this going to affect the communities of color is our biggest concern.
Many of them expressed the concern about the rush hour traffic because they work, so they might not have the option to change the hour to avoid the tolling. And they curious about how the income bracket works. Is there any financial assistance?
We had a discussion group, and it was clear that nobody wants to pay for being on the road, but it was also clear that people also don't want to be in traffic. So everybody agreed on that. As long as we leave an option for people who cannot afford it to still use the freeway for free. Several people made comments that if 205, I-5, and other sections are tolled, that it would unfairly charge working people since they're the ones being in traffic during the rush hour, during the peak hours. So that was pointed out. The question was asked whether there will be specific and special programs for truck drivers. A lot of Russian, Ukrainian men, that's what they do. They drive truck.
The community where I spoke with, they are concerned about the fee, that it's going to be a big impact on them because some of them, they don't have enough money. Like during the pandemic, they're not working enough hours. So it's going to be a big impact on them. But if there is a way to have some financial support.
There was a conversation that occurred around making sure that those who utilize 205 and I-5 frequently and those who are low income paid a rate that was less than other folks. There were other conversations that occurred in terms of wanting to ensure that the funds collected from the tolling fees went back into infrastructure projects.
Thank you. It was really great to hear directly from the organizers of those. So let me step back a little bit. To design a program that can work for our region, ODOT invited feedback from June to September this year on both the project purpose and need and to help us develop a pricing concept. The full results will soon be available online. We're doing the final editing for that. There were 3 significant engagement efforts during this time period. We had briefings with councils, committees, and community organizations. Some of you might have participated in those. We also had discussion groups with historically excluded and underserved communities that you just heard about. And we had a series of 5 simple online surveys distributed through social media and email. And the map here shows the distribution of those results. Do want to highlight that this was an outreach effort. So the results are not statistically representative of the region's population, but we did hear from a lot of people, and these responses are reflective of surveys that we did in 2018 and also 2020. So I'm going to share a few of the findings. First, many participants in the briefings, discussion groups, and surveys agree that traffic is a problem. They also said that travel hasn't changed much due to the COVID-19 pandemic. About 85% of survey respondents think traffic is a problem or somewhat of a problem on I-5 and I-205. Almost 70% of respondents report traveling on I-5 and I-205 about the same or more as March of 2020, and more than 85% expect to travel about the same or more next year. Next slide. Significant numbers of survey respondents agreed that traffic is getting worse. Traffic means more emissions and contributes to climate change, and it takes too long to get to work. More than half of respondents said it's not easy for people with low incomes, disabilities, and other barriers to get to where they need to go. Do want to highlight that climate change emerged as a key issue, with more than 70% strongly or somewhat agreeing that vehicles stuck in traffic means more emissions. In previous surveys, we did not see that many people bringing climate change up, and there was only 4% of people who said they didn't know if it was an issue. Next slide, please. However, there are many questions from all of our engagement efforts. People want to know more about the need for transportation funding, how toll revenue would be used, and the potential impacts from tolling, including financial impacts to drivers experiencing low income and the potential impacts of diversion. And this is especially true in Clackamas County. There was support in the discussion groups for a discounted toll rate for drivers experiencing low incomes or other impacted groups, especially for trips for medical appointments or similar. About 2/3 of survey respondents said they were unaware or disagreed that there is a lack of transportation funding. More than half said they didn't know or disagreed that, freight would be impacted by congestion. In the discussion groups, there were some who questioned whether tolling would actually provide a benefit to travelers. Next slide. Many survey respondents said they will avoid paying tolls and will change their routes or destinations to do so. About 3/4 of survey respondents said they will not be likely to pay a toll on a daily basis. About 2/3 said they would not consider paying a toll to avoid stop and go traffic on local streets. Finally, people want choices to pay or not pay a toll. There was support for a toll-free option, and respondents would consider paying a toll if it would save them about 30 minutes of travel time. We also heard people would consider frequenting a local business if they could avoid a toll. Only 30% said they would use transit if a trip would take 40 minutes or less. And that's the end of my findings for right now. Again, the full results will be online very soon. And I hope that you are connected to our e-news, so you'll learn about it when it is done. And I'm going to turn it back to Sylvia for another Menti exercise.
Great, thank you, Anne. And thanks for letting us know, what the community said over the past few months and kind of those major concerns and what people said about congestion pricing. And we want to hear from you all. You all are in your communities all the time, and we want to hear, does this resonate with you? Are these the kinds of concerns that you've also been hearing? So we invite you to go back to your Menti exercise in your phone or on a browser, go to menti.com and put in the code again if you need to. And live stream viewers, if you're in the Survey Monkey, you can follow along with question number 9. And let's pull up the Menti screen here. And so we want to hear, what concerns have you heard in your community? And you can select as many of these as apply, but this is what we heard over the summer outreach. So concerns about how revenue would be spent. Have you been hearing that in your community? Concerns about impacts to low-income drivers, a desire for good toll-free options. Have you heard about concerns about impacts on the economy, concerns about diversion onto local streets, concern that traffic would not actually decrease as a result of this congestion pricing effort, or something else? And a lot of people are selecting others, so we encourage you to put in the chat so that our project team knows what are those other concerns that you've heard in your community. We'll give you all a second to fill this out. And, it's clear here that there are a lot of questions about how revenue will be spent, concerns about diversion, and impacts to drivers experiencing low incomes, which really resonates with what we heard from the community engagement effort as well. Okay, well, thank you so much for letting us know what you've been hearing. And at this point, we are due for a break. So I'm going to call a break, and it's about 4:05 now. Let's take a 5-minute stretch break here and resume the meeting at 4:10. So feel free to turn off your camera, go on mute, and we'll see you all back here at 4:10. Thanks. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started again here. And we have about 20 minutes of content and panels here before we get into our breakout rooms where you're going to get a chance to bring your voice to the table. So thanks for your patience as we provide this information here. I'm going to hand it over to Garrett Pryor in just a second to lead us through a panel discussion with folks that have experienced congestion pricing across the nation to share their stories. So Garrett, over to you.
Excellent. And you can hear me well?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Garrett Pryor. I am ODOT's Toll Policy Manager. And I know this is like kind of the theme that Director Strickler and Della Mosier laid out. This is going to be a big change for our region, and it's unique, but congestion pricing and tolling has been done in other parts of the country and around the world with success. I like a good research and understanding of what others have done. So we've got a few individuals who are coming to us from the future. They've either worked or studied and worked on projects where this is where it wasn't there and then has happened, and are going to help walk us through that change and see where there's some areas of commonality on what we're facing and what others are. So Lucinda Broussard has 20 plus years of experience managing all electronic tolling systems in Atlanta, and implementing the Washington's Good to Go program that covered multiple projects in Washington state. We also have with us here today David Ungema, is a congestion pricing professional who has worked on 115 congestion pricing projects in 22 states. So he's trying to check off all 50. He's getting there. He's also the past chair of the Transportation Research Board's Congestion Pricing Committee. And thank you both for being here. Brad Larson was able to make it yesterday, but not today. So if you want to talk about, we had an excellent discussion with him, and that'll be on our recorded video we'll send out. So first question up is about public opinion. And we know that wherever congestion pricing or tolling has started, it faces a lot of opposition. There's a lot of opposition to that change. So what has been your experience in places where and seeing people's reaction before and then after congestion pricing or tolling went into place? David, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. Okay, thanks. So yeah, as you mentioned, congestion pricing does have a little bit of a change over time in terms of public acceptance and public opinion about it. In the United States, we've primarily utilized congestion pricing in the application of managed lanes or express lanes. That's where you can pay to utilize a lane on a freeway facility that's immediately adjacent to non-toll general purpose lanes. In Europe and in Asia, however, congestion pricing has primarily been applied as an entrance and area-wide fee within congested urbanized areas and like say downtown central business districts. It doesn't matter whether you're in Stockholm or whether you're in Houston or whether you're in San Diego or Seattle or Singapore. I guess I used a lot of S cities there. Anyway, through all of those, they still have the very same pattern of public acceptance, and it's an inverse bell curve. Initially, when you start off talking about the concept and general high-level, concept of the idea of using congestion pricing to reduce traffic congestion and potentially invest into other types of either multimodal or equity-based investments, you tend to have some favorable opinion. But as more and more details come out, public opinion tends to decline. It goes down in that, kind of a valley, if you will, of public opinion. And it gets at its lowest point almost immediately before opening. There's a lot of fear about how it's going to be applied, what is going to be the impacts to me as an individual and my household, what's it going to be like to my, to my immediate community. Many of the concerns that you heard in the videos right before the break are ones that are echoed very loudly right before implementation. But then we've noticed the same trend again, whether you're in the United States or whether you're in Europe. It's that after opening and the benefits of travel time reduction and VMT reduction and improvement generally in terms of your overall transportation experience are realized, then public opinion begins to increase and pretty quickly as well. It is, as I say, an inverse bell curve so that by the time you're about 6 months out from implementation, you're already almost back to that same level of public acceptance that you had at the initial start of the consideration of the use of pricing.
Definitely. Yeah, so the kind of the night is darkest before the dawn, sort of what Batman would say. Lucinda, what would you add on to that from your experience?
I've seen like on the ground what David's talking about, literally going out and having the public just, it's don't want it, don't need it. It's impacting my whole life. But I've also seen that dawn of the new day. So darkest before dawn, but I've seen the dawn where we've turned it on and people are thanking us by the end of the day because they have saved time. So they've gotten more time with their families. It's almost like quality of life back. Because now you have time to do those things that you were not doing because you were stuck in congestion and probably pretty upset by the time you got home. So literally the calming effect of having something that works when you turn it on and you can see it work. I think when we talk about it, it's very hard for people to, it's as I always say, when you talk about saving time as a benefit, how do you realize that until you actually save the time, right? So I've seen people have the, you know, I liken it to the, this is never going to work. I hate it. It's not going to help me, to, wow, why didn't we do this sooner? So, I mean, you can go, it really does have that pendulum swing over to the, we like it. We may not like paying tolls. And that I'm not saying that. I'm not saying anybody ever jumps up and down and goes, great, we've got a toll. But they do jump up and down and say, look, I have time. I have my time back. So I would say that on the ground, I've seen exactly what David's talking about when he's talking about the research that's been done.
Yeah. And I could see a real parallel to just kind of what COVID has done for work from home and shifting, like, you know, we didn't really know the benefits until we were kind of forced into it. And we now probably we'd like to get back to being, you know, more in person and connected there. But there's definitely, it's one of those things, like you said, you have to really experience it for it to get solidified. I think our next question we were going to talk about are the concerns, like you're saying, David, that are pretty common in areas and that we just saw there in the Menti poll, whether it's about addressing diversion or climate or low income packs or how the revenue is used. Can you choose one or possibly two of those and kind of talk through where have you seen those concerns raised and then addressed in other places?
Sure. Well, let me start with the top one that you had on the list of diversion. This is a real common concern about congestion pricing. For example, when London first explored its program in the early 2000s, they had developed a concept where a zone was placed around central London, and then the road that circled that zone, there was a lot of concern it would massively increase in terms of congestion. And there was a little bit of an increase in congestion on that ring road around London immediately upon opening. But with adjustments to price, they were able to reduce that traffic significantly so that it wasn't as problematic. There are adjustments that can be made over time. In the United States, as mentioned before, most of our congestion pricing expertise or experience has been related to pricing on freeways. And when we think about it for I-5 and 205, this is the experience that we want to leverage and learn from. One of the things that we've learned from is that there's a lot of diversion occurring right now. Right now with traffic saturation, you are experiencing a lot of traffic that goes off onto arterials that parallel a freeway facility. The reason is basic math. So if a freeway is operating at its highest performance, and this, you can think of it like, say, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, it can carry about 2,000 vehicles per hour per lane. So you take each individual lane of a freeway, and let's say it's 3 lanes like an I-5, then you would get, say, 6,000 vehicles that you can push through any point in 1 hour. However, when traffic congestion is so severe that it saturates the roadway, it actually declines significantly down to around 1,000, 1,100, maybe even less, 800 or 900 vehicles per hour per lane. You're getting half of the productivity of that freeway lane during traffic congestion. But obviously there's a lot of cars out there. There's a lot more, attempts to get onto the freeway. So where are they? They're actually on those parallel arterial roadways. They're interacting right now with our communities. Anyone who's opened up Waze or Google Maps or Apple Maps and tries to get around traffic, you're contributing to that diversion right now. With congestion pricing, we know that with the resulting decrease in demand, around 10 to 15% of demand is all that you're really targeting for a freeway facility. You can actually restore that free flow capacity and that throughput on the existing lanes of travel. It's almost like widening the highway without actually having to widen anything. It's like restoring all those lanes back to their full productivity. And as a result, we start to see a reduction in the amount of traffic that goes onto parallel roads and arterials that impact the communities because of it.
Exactly. Thank you so much, David. Lucinda, what do you want to talk about diversion, or maybe choose one of the other concerns that we've heard about?
I'm going to hit just a little bit on diversion, and then I'll go to equity. How about that? Okay. So I'll do some shifts here. So just a little bit on diversion. I mean, when we talk about diversion, it's not every car that's on the highway that has now gone through the community is really a car diverting. Is it a car now taking its correct trip? So I think that we have lumped everybody into, if you get off the freeway, you're a diverter. And that is really not true. So there are probably a couple of populations in there that need to be like synthesized out. But yeah, I'm just like, I don't want, to me, it's like when you say diversion, that means everybody who got off the freeway is diverting. And that's not true. So just that we have that, there are local trips you should be taking on your local roads. And we want to encourage those. Those are not going through your community. You pay for that community to go through. So you should use your community roads. If you're taking those long trips or, it's not one freeway exit from your home, right? And that's diversion if you get off and you don't get back on because you only need it to go one exit. So kind of how we talk about diversion. Diversion is not the whole population. That's it for that. And then I'll talk about equity. And I'll talk about it in the sense that equity is new. It is the newest thing that we're talking about. We're talking maybe 5 years ago, we weren't talking about equity. We were talking about communities that came and said, hey, you're impacting me. It's not really equity in the sense, we're not looking for you, you're looking for us and you need us to do something. We are now talking about equity in the forefront of what we do, which is totally different than what the world is doing. And we really haven't seen really what the impact is of how we address equity yet. Like we haven't seen it work out. I think that we're in that interesting spot where we're trying to be really in the forefront of equity. And no, we don't know what the future looks like, but equity is in our future, right? And I think we're just trying to take steps towards it. I would tell you that there's no game plan that says you reached it, here's equity. Everybody's trying to figure that out. And the only way to have equity is to figure out what the needs of the community are and address those needs. So that's my equity. I took equity and a piece of diversion. Definitely. Darkest before the dawn. There you go.
And folks, I just wanted to say, David, if you don't mind speaking up a bit when you go, we just heard you're a little quiet. Thanks.
Great, will do. Thanks.
Yeah. So building within the equity bucket, could one of you speak to low income impacts and how that's been looked at or addressed in other projects? Or both of you?
Let's both. I think we see it, we've touched it from different places. So when we're talking about a low income toll, I think that is like a new something, right? We've given credits and discounts for many different things. People who are using cash, we've tried to do something for cash users, which we probably have lumped into people of low income, which really is not true. We're just saying they're cash basis, but people have kind of lumped them into a low income because they're using cash only. So we've tried to address that over the years by providing different sources for you to use. It's almost like if we're saying it's a credit card needed, then we're finding services that provide you with that credit card with your cash. So then that way you can do a transaction with us. So we've seen that. We've also seen if you use the commuter service, a bus, so many times we'll give you credits on your toll account. Again, another way to try to mitigate that. But we have really never seen, minus LA Metro, folks actually going after what low income tolls look like apart from a bus, apart from transit, just a toll road that says, hey, give me some low income tolls and let me show you what that looks like. I think we are going to step into that as House Bill 3055 kind of says we have to do income-based tolls. So we'll have some experience to share with others about how this works, and what we could do better. I think we're going to have a lot of lessons learned. Go ahead, David.
And then the only other thing I'd add, because Lucinda, you got it, I think all the points correct, right on target, is the recent infrastructure bill that was just passed by the House last week actually also calls out explicitly the utilization of toll revenue for equity-based uses. So there is, I think, not only a recognition in the state, but also at the federal level that equity has got to be a component of consideration of how we utilize our toll facilities and revenue, and that includes all congestion-priced facilities.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be discovered in all of that. So yeah, thank you.
Well, Sylvia, I think that might be our time for this, or do we have a few more minutes, or are we good?
Yeah, I think this is great. If you had, 1 minute, 30-second wrap up from each of you, that would be great. And then we can move into the next part.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I had a kind of my final thought or wrap up question would just be, from your experience in all these other places and now like looking at and being in the Portland metro area, without trying to solve it, what do you think is going to be our biggest challenge into seeing this on the ground and start it up? David, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think that one of the greatest challenges is recognizing that this is a process and not a defined project, right? We're used to building something, seeing it constructed, and then kind of walking away and never thinking of it again. Congestion pricing, to be successful, is a commitment to ongoing operations. And by operations, that means constantly reevaluating all the decisions that are made, tweaking them a little bit, and then trying to implement something different in order to maintain those performance benefits over time. We're really providing a service. We're operating more like a utility with congestion pricing than we have in the past that we typically think about with highway infrastructure.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely. Lucinda,
I'm just going to add 15 seconds to what he said. He said it's a service, and it is. We are talking about customer service, and we are talking about doing it differently than DOTs do it, which is really build it and walk away. We are saying that, you're our customer, and we're going to be with you throughout this whole process. So,
yep.
Thank you.
Yep, it's not a set it and forget it situation. So thanks so much, Lucinda and David, for your time. That was excellent, and your expertise here. And Sylvia, I'll now kick it back to you.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you for your stories from across the nation and your experiences with congestion pricing. All right. And in a second, I'm going to hand it over to Josh to go over the first major decision for the project, which is the purpose and need. And this will dovetail into the breakout rooms that we'll have shortly. So Josh, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Josh Channel. I'm the team lead conducting the planning and technical analysis for the project. So today I'm just going to tee up what we're going to talk about in the breakout groups, which is coming up next. You have heard the history of how we got here. Over the next 6 months or so, we're really looking to nail down some of the specifics on the project, working with you and many other stakeholders. We think this project has the potential to really improve our region. But first, we want to make sure we're all on the same page for what we're actually hoping to improve. So what specifically are we asking you to react to? At the end of July, we published what's the picture here, a discussion draft purpose and need statement. A purpose and need statement is done for all major transportation projects that involve federal funds or facilities, in this case, the interstate highway system. And the title says it all. This is the justification asking these questions: what's the project for and why do we need to do it? So we're asking for your input on these questions. It's not a particularly long document. It's about 5 pages. We're asking for comments. Comment period is closing November 17th. It's a week from today, but we'll also use any input you give us today. So next slide. So let's start with the purpose. It's a single sentence. We're trying to very clearly state that we are proposing to implement congestion pricing, that it's on I-5 and I-205 in Oregon, in the Portland metro area, and that we have 2 primary goals for the pricing: to manage congestion on these highways and to generate revenue so that we can fund future transportation projects. So any version of the project has to meet these 2 fundamental goals. The statement also limits what the project is. It's a congestion pricing project. It's not a new highway, it's not a gondola, it's a congestion pricing project. Following the purpose statement, we have 6 need statements. These are the 6 major issues in our region that we think this project can help address. They're equal in importance. Today, they're numbered for simplicity, but we could really present these in any order. I'll quickly go through these 6, and then we'll split into discussion groups where we can talk about them. Thank you. So issue number 1, daily traffic congestion is negatively affecting the quality of life in our region. This happens every day. Many hours are wasted idling in traffic. It's going to get worse, much worse, unless we act. Our region is growing very quickly. A lot more people are projected to live here, more jobs in the region. This means more vehicles on the road, more vehicle miles traveled, more time spent in these vehicles unless we make some changes. So ODOT's calculating that if we don't act, by 2040, every household is going to be spending almost 3 days stuck in traffic every year. This has a very personal effect. This is time you could be spending with family, friends, walking the dog, maybe earning some extra income. But this congestion also has tremendous impact for our quality of life. There are a lot of vehicles exiting the highway to take our local roads. People trying to travel at highway speeds on local roads makes them unsafe. When a lot of vehicles do it, it makes them gridlocked. And until all vehicles are electric, it has terrible consequences for air quality and for our climate. Next slide. So number 2, traffic congestion is also slowing down economic growth. Director Strickler highlighted the importance of our highways for our economy. Traffic volumes have quickly bounced back after the lockdowns from COVID. Probably many of you have been stuck in traffic jams. This congestion means that we can't predictably get people to work on time. Contractors can't get to as many job sites. We can't move our products where they need to go on time. And traffic congestion is making it more expensive for all of us, an estimated $2 million in lost productivity every day. So next slide. Number 3, our transportation system must reduce greenhouse gas emissions by managing congestion. Director Strickler talked about transportation emissions being the largest source of emissions in the state, and what ODOT's doing to try to meet the state's goals for reductions. In our need statement, it clearly says what we think needs to happen. We must decrease the number of hours vehicles spend stuck in traffic, the amount of stop and go traffic, and the number of miles traveled by motor vehicles in the state. Next slide. Okay, the Portland metropolitan area's transportation networks have resulted in inequitable outcomes for historically and currently excluded and underserved communities. We've talked about this in a couple of different ways today. Of course, one of the best known examples in the country is in this region, shown in this photo. The near destruction of the historic Albina neighborhood to make way for I-5, hospital and Memorial Coliseum. These injustices are not history. They have implications that continue to affect how equitable our transportation system is today. When we are proposing congestion pricing, we have to be really deliberate to make sure we aren't causing new trauma and that our system moves towards being more equitable. Okay, let's go to number 5. Our transportation system must support multimodal travel to reduce congestion. We're talking about encouraging people to, who have a choice to use a different travel option. We have to make sure that we're supporting different travel options so that we can reduce congestion. Effective transit and complete networks for pedestrian and bicycle travels and safe connections to transit stops are all give people toll-free ways to get to a destination. So we think a lot about how this project can support multimodal travel. It's not just about new options. We also need to make sure that when we're applying tolls to the interstates, we're not jeopardizing the safety of or resulting in longer travel time for people using bikes, transit, or sidewalk. We think that multimodal options and transit and congestion pricing all work together. Next slide. Last one, revenues from the gas tax are not sufficient to fund transportation infrastructure needs. The gas tax, 18.3 cents per gallon, has not been raised in 28 years. Since 1993, when it was last raised, 2 trends have conspired to make this worth much less. In the graph on the top right, construction costs have risen 170% relative to inflation. Vehicles have gotten much more efficient, 26% across the fleet. This is a good thing, but it also means that although there's more vehicles on the road that are driving more miles, they're actually generating less in revenue while they're putting more impacts on our roads. So taken together, the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy estimates that the purchasing power has fallen by more than 2/3. So what does that mean here? In Oregon, it means that there's a $500 million shortfall every year for maintenance of ODOT facilities. We're terribly underspending what's needed to maintain the facilities. So we all want a better, less polluting, more efficient, and multimodal transportation system. It's really hard to do when you don't have enough income coming. Next slide. So we're going to split you up into some discussion groups, but first a quick plug. Please make comments on this discussion draft, or please make comments in these breakout groups today. Asking for comments by next Wednesday. You can use the QR code with the little dinosaur on it here if you'd like, and it'll take you directly to the document. So with that, I will turn it over to Sylvia.
Great, thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to get into our breakout rooms in just a second to reflect on a little bit of what you heard here with the purpose and need, and talk about how the congestion pricing effort can meet the region's needs. So just a little bit of instructions for the breakout room on the next slide. So during this time, members of the public, you'll have a break. We're going to be in breakout rooms for about 45-50 minutes here. And so members of the public, you're invited to answer questions number 10 and 11 in the Survey Monkey to provide your input on the purpose and need. And workshop participants, in a moment, you'll get an alert on your computer to join a breakout room. And so we'll be in those rooms for about 45-50 minutes. And we'll be talking about, the need to manage congestion, generate revenue, and then sort of have group choice on what other topics you want to talk about, be it equitable congestion pricing, climate change, supporting transit, and multimodal options. We'll have a facilitator, note taker, and kind of a sticky board manager and ODOT staff that's in listening mode in each of those rooms. And we do want these breakout rooms to really be a conversation and not a Q&A session. So we hope that you're be able to bring your voice to the table, and we want to be able to hear from everyone and have you have an opportunity to hear from each other. And as Josh said, your input will help inform kind of refinements to this to the purpose and need, and development of project concept moving forward. And if you're not able to find your breakout room, or the join breakout room button doesn't work for you, Madeline Kane will be in this kind of main Zoom room to help direct you on where to go. And when we get back into the main room, we'll have facilitators do kind of a 2-minute report out on key points so that you all can hear what was said and members of the public can hear what was said. And we'll also have time for reflections from this large group. So at that point, we'll ask you to kind of raise your hand, get in on the conversation. I know that many of you have been wanting to kind of talk in this large group as well. So that's it for kind of our instructions here. We have until about 4:40 for the breakout rooms. So members of the public, take a break until around 4:40, and we'll get some notices in the room when we have, 2 and 5 minutes left. Okay, so at this point, I think Madeline, you can start up the breakout rooms, and everyone just click the join button that's popping up and enjoy your conversations. And we'll see you back in the main room. I'm sorry, at 5:30. 4:40 is now. Breakout rooms will end at about 5:30. Thanks.
Mr. Rosenthal. We're doing some breakout rooms. I'll go ahead and put you in one of the breakout rooms if you're ready.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I'm hoping that we are back, that everyone's back in the main room now. If we can just go to the next slide. Okay, so we had a great conversation in the breakout room that I got a chance to be a part of, and I hope you all did too. We'll just do some brief report outs on high level themes of what we heard. So I'll go first from breakout room number 1, and then I'll hand it over to Anne and then to Chris to do some report outs too. So our group had a conversation really on a lot of the topics for the need. Thinking about managing congestion, I feel like the main thing that came out is that the goal should really be system efficiency to achieve equity and climate goals, and making sure that there are real choices for those that have limited access to driving, that can't drive, that would prefer not to drive, and really having less driving be a driving goal for this entire effort. And also just making sure that we're not pricing out working class folks that really have to drive, and maybe even having conversations with employers in the region on how can we change the way people work so that they're driving at different times where they aren't paying as high of a toll. In terms of equity, we had a good conversation on how to make congestion pricing equitable. And it was important to consider alternate transportation modes for low income drivers, folks with disabilities, seniors. So really looking at a wide range of people that may need some support. And noting that equity would look differently for different groups, for all of those different groups. It's not just a one size fits all system. And there was a lot of conversation about needing to think intersectionally and talking to communities and seeing what their needs are, and basing the equity framework on that. And we also talked about the need to pair the congestion pricing effort with everything else that's happening in the region, thinking holistically, looking at especially what's come out with the infrastructure bill passing. How can we take this as an opportunity, take advantage of this moment to think more holistically about building a great system and meeting urban regional mobility needs. We also talked a bit about climate change and, what would it look like to get more efficient vehicles on the road, and could people turn in their gas guzzling vehicles for an EV and get some kind of rebate? And it sounds like there are some programs like that out there, so communicating that a little bit more. And of course the need to invest in transit came up quite a bit there. We talked about revenue generation as a goal of the project, and there was concern about having revenue generation be a goal at all, and really instead the goal should be to make it easier to not drive. And it sounded like there was a need to use any revenue that's generated to also make restitution in communities that haven't received it yet in the Portland metro region. And I think I'll stop there. We had a great discussion, and I'll pass it over to Anne. And I think you're on mute.
Because it's the end of the day, isn't it? Sorry about that. Had to happen once. Sounds like Sylvia's group had a great discussion, and we had some similar themes that came up. We, at the beginning of the conversation, getting it right really looked like designing for the people who are the most vulnerable. So really think about that when we're designing the system, and that a recognition that if we design a system for people who are the most vulnerable and underserved, that everybody will benefit from it. And making sure that we're looking out to avoid exacerbating existing inequalities. In terms of generating revenue, we really looked at, what should be, how should we invest money? Is just really, or any revenue is making it really easy to get around. And that anytime we're making decisions, we should really go back to the goals of the project and make decisions based on the goals. And looking at making it easier to get around, as I said, especially as it relates to, we had someone who was who lives or works in East Multnomah County. So thinking about how in East Multnomah County, it's east of where a toll system would be, and there's a good transit network, but still, folks need to get from that area back into the city a lot of the times. We also talked about just reliability and accessibility as being a big need, and predictability, again, designing for the most vulnerable. In the end, it's just really about tying all of our decision to the outcomes that we want. And I think that's about it. I'll turn it over to Chris.
Awesome. Yeah, we had a really lively discussion, lots of good thoughts. So in regards to the first question, really kind of focusing on the use of the tolls to pay for construction and to reduce congestion, really a focus on the highway and making sure that things are flowing right, that things are working right. There's there was cost as a major concern, making sure that we're not pricing folks off the freeway, but that there's also a kind of acknowledgement that if you have a good product, if you have a predictable kind of better trip, faster trip, that at least in some of the perspectives shared, they'd be willing to pay the toll. Really important to have a coordinating tolling system, making sure that the various different toll projects or concepts aren't disjointed, making sure that they're integrated. And yeah, just an overall sense that willing to pay the toll if tolling works. For the second question, is really focused. A lot of the input was really about investments in the roads to make sure that they're functioning. But also interest in funding additional local projects to accommodate in terms of the local road network, to accommodate traffic and provide those local benefits to communities that might at first glance not like the idea of tolling. Really important for those revenues to be invested in the roads and to build the capacity necessary to make sure that the system's working well. And push comes to shove, lower rather than a higher toll, but certainly enough to pay for the basic maintenance operation of the system, make sure the system's running well, and that we're able to fund the key projects, capital projects that are needed to make sure that the freeway is working. So I hope I captured the group's input well.
That's great. Thank you, Ann and Chris. And we want to turn it over to participants now too. Would love to hear your reflections from the breakout rooms. Did anything stick out to you, or is there anything else that you want to say about, how congestion pricing can be done in the region successfully? So we invite you to raise your hand and get in the conversation if you want to add anything to these report outs or just lift anything up that was said in your groups. If you find the reaction button at the bottom of the screen and click on that, you'll see the option to raise your hand there. So if you have something you want to add, we encourage you to jump in now. See if there's any raised hands here.
I will add an additional perspective, if that's okay. That was shared in our group. Sure. That the concept of making sure that we're using data to inform our investments, and what is the result of placing a price on mobility on the freeways? Does that affect demand? Does it change the flow of things? And if so, then making sure that we're investing in those areas strategically. So I thought that was a good point too.
One other point that came up in my group is when will people see the benefits? If the revenue is being used for other investments, is there going to be a delay? And there was a thought that people will want to see the improvements right away. And so how would that all work? Especially if they were construction related investments.
Yeah, thanks, Chris and Ann, for those additions. Right. Anyone else want to bring in something that came in your group, or just something you want to add? Right. It's getting close to dinner time, so I get it. Well, we do have a few more things that we want to cover, and then can probably be done in about 10 minutes here. We're getting to the end of our workshop here, and we wanted to do one last interactive activity with everyone just to see how did this go and what's left for you in terms of top questions. So last time that we'll be pulling out your phones to go to the Menti activity. So please kind of go to that menti.com and put in the code that's in the chat, or just stay in the browser that you're already in. If you're still in the live stream, you can answer questions number 12 and 13 in the Survey Monkey. And if we go to the Menti screen here, we just want to see, what top questions do you still have that we didn't get to? What is your top concern now? So you kind of answered a version of this at the beginning of the workshop, but we want to see what else is left for you. Do you have a top question that we didn't get to, or a main concern that you really still have, even despite kind of learning more at this workshop? So feel free to just answer free form. We'll see what pops up. All right, well, either you have no questions or it's a little late in the day to get creative with this. So appreciate that. And Anne, did you want to jump in?
Oh, I just thought everyone was just a little, it's the end of the day.
It's the end of the day. Great, perfect. Yeah, so still worried about revenue generation being the main goal. How did the Highway Trust Fund rules affect the goals? Really good question. And really, how is this feedback going to be used? I think that's a good question too. And maybe, Anne, since you are up here, do you want to talk a little bit about how feedback would be incorporated into this moving forward?
So we have, in terms of where we are right now, we're looking for some feedback on this discussion graph for the purpose and need statement. So we'll look at comments that we received and see how that applies. And that'll also be used as the technical team is developing a pricing concept in our next phase of planning. So we will be summarizing everything we've gotten. We'll be reporting back out to you. We'll do a summary of this. So, and we will then also report how we've used the feedback, but that'll be in not for a little while as we work through the process.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Okay, and then we have one more Menti question if we go to the next one. We just want to see if you feel like you learned more today. So after hearing about the Oregon Toll Program and the congestion pricing project today, do you feel like you're very knowledgeable, kind of somewhat knowledgeable about the project? No one said that they were unfamiliar at the beginning. So hopefully your level of knowledge is not decreased after today's workshop. But if you want to let us know whether you feel like you learned a lot or somewhat knowledgeable, let us know here. Oh, when it says voting is closed. Okay, so you can let us know about that offline if it's still working for you. And if we go back to the PowerPoint, I'm just going to hand it back over to Lucinda to give us a bit of a closing, and then I'll share some next steps and what it looks like for 2022.
Sure, no problem. Thank you. I just want to thank you all for joining us and for hanging in there with us. I know 3 hours, as I said, a long time, but it kind of did go fast. I kind of jotted down some things that I heard as our wrap up. So we talked in the beginning about why we're doing the project. Director Strickler talked about the how. Della Mosier came in and kind of did a cleanup. And now we're talking about the what, and that was the workshop part when you guys were all in and giving us your ideals. So I have managing congestion, holistic system, efficient, equity, and climate. But there was one piece that someone said, it said reimagine it. So don't do what we're doing now, just reimagine. If we could do anything we want, what's that reimagine look like and how do we implement that? Washington State concerns with our Constitution, the Oregon Constitution of not moving money across borders, how we should invest, what decisions based on what goals, right? Like what are we investing in? And then what are the goals? What are we trying to achieve? EVs and EVs for low income. I think you heard that a couple of times. The system should be reliable, predictable, dependable. And that kind of came through from everyone. Make sure not pricing people off the freeway. integrated toll systems, not disjointed, funding for local roads, revenue invested in the roadway, lower tolls to pay for basic maintenance and operations, and improvements right away. Can we see the improvements when we get started? So what improvements can we do right away? Thank you. We can't make this up. This is the ideal of partnership and talking about what's needed. I mean, we have some view of that, but together, I think we can get there. We can't get there by ourselves. So we want to thank you again for joining us. Really appreciate it. And Sylvia will provide an update.
Perfect. Thank you, Lucinda. All right, so if we go back to the PowerPoint, just a couple of next steps here. Right, so, after today's workshop, the project team is going to be refining the purpose and need based on input and still looking for any additional comments you have through about November 17th. And then the next step will be to develop congestion pricing concept and policy options. And we look forward to engaging you on those pieces in early 2022, spring 2022, kind of continuing that conversation with broader stakeholder and public engagement. Anytime you have any questions, go to oregontolling.org for the latest information. And you also got a link to a fact sheet that has all the different ways to stay engaged. And that's on the website as well. And then on the next slide, we just, want to know, how was this workshop for you? So if you have a chance, we would appreciate if you could fill out this evaluation form. You can go to the SurveyMonkey link here, which is surveymonkey.com/r/F3XH3Z6, or just scan the QR code. And that link is also in the meeting materials that you received. So again, just want to thank you. I think this is it for our workshop, and really appreciate you staying with us, and hope you have an enjoyable evening, and look forward to your continued participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Very interesting. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ending the stream.